Hello, Whitewater students. Rick Oling here. So this YouTube video is going to serve as our introduction to the class this week. I decided to do this instead of the WebEx meetings that I had spoken of scheduling for tomorrow, Wednesday, for the Monday, Wednesday groups. That's canceled. And also for the Tuesday, Thursday group, the one that would have been on Thursday, September 3rd. Those ones we're canceling. This is a substitute for them, and next week we'll start WebEx for real. But I decided to postpone it to next week. All right. I want to put out some themes that we'll be looking at, some topics of the class, a little bit as mysteries. I want to solve one of the mysteries that I put out in the first video, and just take us a little bit further into our subject matter. So this is still a video for 101, 102, and 105. So I won't be talking so much about Toni Morrison, the writer that we're reading only in 102 and 105, and I won't be talking so much today about Glenway Westcott, the writer we'll be reading only in 101. But I do want to take a couple minutes here with Joyce Carol Oates, and then we'll shift to some other topics. All right. So most of the books on these shelves, even these behind family photos are by Joyce Carol Oates. But I also have 3 shelves at home uh, by Joyce Carol Oates. So I have a lot. Some of them are library books, but a lot of them I own. And she's a tremendously prolific writer. Because of that, people often make dismissive remarks about, like, well, how good can the books be if she writes that much? So we'll address that. But my feeling is in the 19th century, this was not that uncommon uh, for people to write this much, and great writers like Charles Dickens, right? So I don't know what's about our lazy age that when someone achieves this much, people have to say, if there's that much quantity, the quality can't be good. And I think you guys will see from the stories you read that that's not true. Uh, Golden Gloves. It's certainly a good example of a story that may be quite short, and the first reading seems kind of simple, but boy, are there layers there, right? Profound layers. All right, we'll also be talking a bit about Marilyn Monroe, a subject that I think has a surprisingly long shelf life. You know, you'd think that one more actress, blonde actress who died in the middle of the 20th century, uh, and had this kind of legendary status because of her image, her look, like this emphasized in the cover of the Maryland Encyclopedia here, would fade, right? Interest would fade after a decade or so. Well, interest is stronger than ever in Norma Jean Baker, Marilyn Monroe. And it's not because of her look, it's not because she's still in fashion. It's because with all the different portraits that have been done of her after her death have revealed, um, mostly through people doing kind of more careful research into her life, is that she was a very deep, profound, kind, funny individual. There are a lot of dimensions there that people kind of got a sense of, but they were so enamored of the role she played in the movies, this dumb blonde role, which she did very well. She was surprisingly funny in these roles. Um, they shouldn't have had any depth, and yet she was able to bring a certain kind of quirky charm to them that makes them memorable. Um, the novel deals more with the more thoughtful, soulful side of her life, and she did have a lot of tragedy early on in her life. So the novel, Blonde, and then there was also a 3-hour TV movie made out of it, and there's going to be an hour and a half feature film in the next year or so. Um, they all acknowledge the tragedy. I believe, and the novel kind of I think suggests this too, that Marilyn Monroe died of an accidental overdose, and it wasn't suicide. So her death is tragic, but it allows for the possibility that because it was an accident, maybe Norma Jean Baker was actually in a pretty good place and actually planned to make changes to her career that meant that the future might have proven a lot more promising than the past. I do think she had come to the end of something uh, at that time. Uh, so we'll talk about that later. All right, I want to move a little bit faster here since the time is zipping by. Uh, this is a Graham Greene novel called A Burnt Out Case, set in a leper colony in Africa. Very powerful work. But Graham Greene's fun because he does write very deep books. He deals with religious themes and deep, deep things. But he's also a really good read, very suspenseful. And I used to read a lot of his books in the 20s, in my 20s and 30s, pretty fast. I wanted to read everything by him. And he wrote a lot. He would travel around the world and write suspense novels in Vietnam and Cuba, in Heart of Africa. And I also wanted to read lots of books by Iris Murdoch, who wrote lots of books. And I wanted to own the books. I wanted to be able to reread them. I need to own them. I need to get them for cheap. And this was the mystery I put out. Why is there a penguin on my shelves? It's because of Penguin Books. I don't know if you saw the small penguin insignia on a lot of these. Um, what's the penguin? Penguin Books made all the world's literature and wisdom, and they also did history and philosophy, religion, what have you. They made these books available to us at a remarkable price. And then they would circulate in used bookstores. They're tough little books. And they could be bought and sold and bought and sold. And so by the time I went to a bookstore and needed to get a cheap Graham Greene, it was only going to be like $2 or $3. And I was able to build a really big library. Now, my library does not look really beautiful and fancy like the ones you see in movies about the 19th century and aristocrats and them. Oftentimes, they would just have books to decorate a room. But I'm very grateful to uh, Penguin Books and other publishers who allowed me, you know, to build a great library at a great price. Same with my record collection. I own a lot of, you've probably seen in my videos from home, I own a lot of LPs, records. I wanted to discover new music when I turned 40. I wanted to explore jazz vocalists. I never really knew jazz at all. And I was living around the corner from St. Vincent de Paul on Williamson Street in Madison. At that time, they had great records at great prices. Unfortunately, that's not really true anymore. But it allowed me to go around the corner, try out different jazz artists. Um, some I decided I didn't like at all, and then others, I'd pay $1 or so for a record by Carmen McRae, and eventually buy as many records by her as I could. I think she's one of the great jazz singers of the last century. So these are things that I like to research. I'm not going to ask you guys to research any of these things in depth. There's no reason to. But for our exercises and things like that, I'm going to try to find interesting and odd ways to tempt you towards subjects that have kind of hidden depth to them and hopefully tell a story that's interesting. So let me share a kind of awful image with you here. It's kind of grotesque, it's kind of bloody, but it really begs for an explanation. So the good news is that I have an image, but I also have um, researched uh, information about the image that would help. All right, so someone's being cut in half. Make sure you note the look on the man's face, and the horse also merits attention. So hopefully you guys can see this. Don't worry, in the future I will be using PowerPoint properly and not the method I first learned teaching in the cave in the Neanderthal age. So what was going on there? Oh, and I just closed the book. That's all right. Let me tell you what I know about it. First of all, it's from 1500s, Persia, nowadays Iran. They have a tradition of miniature painting that is part of watercolor, but applied so thickly that it's opaque, they called it. That means that really very little sense of water at all. Water gives it this translucency or transparency. When you really use a lot of pigment, it looks opaque, like more like tempera paint. All right. The story was that the young man, Rustam, was having his lunch and wine and goat, and a witch saw him and she wanted his food from him. So she turned herself into a beautiful woman and joined him. And I think he was onto her tricks because he started to sing the praises of God, knowing that she would not be able to stomach that. And sure enough, the witch turned black, and he realizing that she was a threat, cut her in half. And I guess he was surprised. I love the look on his face, like, "Whoops, boy, I had sharpened that knife before I headed out. Didn't realize it. Well, it worked. So there you go. Wouldn't that be frustrating to see that image and wonder what was going on there? I guess there's probably even more we could know. But at least the advantage of that book is that they tell me those essential facts based on careful research that can get me started on discovery of what's going on here. What do you see? All right, I think that's enough. I think I will just do this one video. Please remember to use email to address any questions to me, and I'll be checking it regularly. All right. Have a nice Wednesday and Thursday.